Since its official launch in 2011, Minecraft has received a total of 19 major content updates, with its 20th coming early this year. Throughout the years, the game has had some truly amazing updates, with features that revolutionised and innovated Minecraft's gameplay like never before. But there's also been some rather lacklustre ones, whether it's down to lack of content, disappointment from the community, or in some cases, Mojang failing to deliver on promised features. Today, I'd like to take some time to review every major Minecraft update from version 1.0 to 1.20 in the form of a tier list. I'll give a brief overview of what each update brought to the table, as well as my reasoning for its placement on the list. This is just my opinion however, so do feel free to share your own thoughts in the comments as well, and as always, enjoy. Without further ado, let's start with version 1.0. Released on November 18th, 2011, this was the official launch of Minecraft as it came out of alpha and beta. It was also the final content update that Notch himself worked on personally before handing the reins over to Jeb. The 1.0 update added a variety of iconic features, such as enchanting, which allowed players to add all sorts of buffs to their weapons and armour, brewing, along with many new ingredients for players to create all sorts of potions, and of course the end dimension. The end was introduced in this update as a way of adding, well, an end to the game. That way, Notch felt comfortable saying that the official release of Minecraft was a completed experience. 1.0 also saw tons of new blocks, mechanics and biomes added, with some highlights being an additional 9 music discs composed by C418, the Mushroom Island biome, villages and villagers, and hardcore mode, which was a way for seasoned survival players to truly test their abilities. I think, considering the initial hype surrounding the game's release, and just how influential this update actually was, obviously a lot of these features really did make the game feel like a completed project, and I think it was a good way for Notch to sort of end his head developer career on the game. So I think for that reason, I'm going to place 1.0 in a very solid A tier. I just think it was really influential and honestly just a pretty historic moment in the game's history. Next, let's take a look at version 1.1. This update was released in early 2012, not long after the game's official release. This update aimed to improve upon existing features introduced in 1.0, as well as adding a variety of new items and mechanics. Some of the most notable additions were spawn eggs, which acted as a way for players to summon any mob or animal they wanted into their worlds. The beach biome was also added to add a little more immersion to the game world and to also smooth the transition from land to sea. The brand new super flat world type was also added, which was perfect for players to test their building skills without the hassle of having to clear large amounts of space. Update 1.1 was understandably a lot smaller than 1.0, considering that it was a major release of the game, but overall I really don't think there was tons to look forward to in this update, apart from super flat, so I think for that reason I'll put 1.1 in C tier. It wasn't a bad update, but it definitely wasn't anywhere near as exciting as the official release was, so I think that's why it gets that placement. Update 1.2 added a lot of changes primarily to world generation. Most notably of these was the addition of the jungle biome, which was incredibly unique and novel at the time of its release. Underground mineshafts and desert wells were also added, all features which helped to give the game world a little more life and personality than before. We also saw the introduction of the Iron Golem, which would defend villages from hostile mobs such as zombies. The jungle biome also saw the addition of the Ocelot mob, which could be tamed with raw fish. Another feature which I think is largely overlooked was the extension of the world height limit from 128 blocks to 256. This allowed players to build higher than ever before, and it would stay this way until much later in 1.18. Funnily enough, this was also the update which finally allowed mob spawners to display the correct mob inside their cage, rather than a pig. I think considering that 1.2 was a fairly substantial update and it also added one of my personal favourite biomes into the game, I think that 1.2 deserves a pretty solid B tier. It definitely was better than 1.1, but obviously not quite as in-depth as the official release was, so I think B is a pretty solid placement for this update. Up next is version 1.3. This update's flagship feature was villager trading, which finally gave villagers a purpose, as up until now, the player was unable to interact with them at all. Trading was one of the most influential additions to Minecraft, allowing for players to exchange emeralds for goods with different kinds of villagers. Emeralds could also be found inside Extreme Hills biomes, except they were incredibly rare. So rare in fact that the emerald ore block was up to 30 times rarer than diamond ore. Another important mention is the introduction of ender chests, which proved a very useful way for players to access their most valuable items from anywhere in their world, so long as they had another ender chest on them. 1.3 also flushed out some of 1.2's features by adding jungle temples to the recently added jungle biome, as well as desert temples and desert villages. Another interesting feature for this update was the addition of the Enchanted Golden Apple, or more famously known as the Notch Apple. I think that 1.3 was a really good update for the game, as of course villagers were actually able to be used properly now, as before now they didn't really have a use. So I think, and obviously we have to consider the actual importance of villager trading and how influential that was for the game, because up until now it remains a very prominent mechanic. So I think A tier is a good placement for 1.3. Also known as the Pretty Scary update, version 1.4 added the first boss enemy since the Ender Dragon back in 1.0. The Wither was a new mob which players could summon by defeating Wither skeletons and obtaining 3 of their skulls. The Wither was a difficult fight, and unlike the Ender Dragon, could be fought in any dimension of the game. Players who defeated the Wither could craft a beacon, which acted as a way for players to buff stats such as resistance and regeneration within a limited radius. As well as the Wither, 1.4 also added the Witch Mob and Witch Huts, a new structure found rarely in the Swamp biome. In addition to these features, 1.4 introduced command blocks, which were an advanced way for players to experiment with redstone and Minecraft's more complex mechanics. I think 1.4 was a pretty solid update. Obviously it added the Wither, which was the first new boss enemy since the Ender Dragon, and I think this added a new sense of challenge, especially for players who had already beat the Ender Dragon, as it obviously wasn't until 1.9 where players could go to the Outer End Islands and actually have post-game content. So I think for that, 1.4 deserves a really good B tier. I don't think it's as good as maybe 1.3, but definitely the addition of the Wither was a pretty substantial feature, I would say. 1.5 was one of the most influential updates in Minecraft history. Nicknamed the Redstone Update, 1.5 totally revolutionised the game as players knew it for the better. This update released a whole host of features such as the Hopper, Redstone Comparator, Dropper, Activator Rail, and the ability to combine hoppers with minecarts, which would make collection systems much easier to make. In addition to the many new redstone contraptions, 1.5 also added the new Quartz family of decorative blocks from a new ore found in the Nether. Another overlooked feature of this update was the preview release of Minecraft Realms, which was a subscription-based server provided by Mojang. I think to say that the addition of redstone was a revolutionary feature from the game would honestly be an understatement. I think without a doubt this is the first S tier of the list, just because of how impactful this was. And of course, if it wasn't for redstone, we wouldn't have a lot of YouTubers that we do have now in the Minecraft space. So yeah, definitely S tier. 1.6 was a bit of a smaller update, launching around the same time that I started playing Minecraft. Its smaller size, however, was understandable considering the scale of the previous Redstone update. Perhaps its biggest landmark feature was the addition of horses, a new form of traversal for players, along with hay bales and horse armour. Admittedly, however, horses were a bit of a pain to use, especially when needing to cross over water. Along with horses, mules and donkeys were also added, as well as the zombie horse mob. However, this mob would not spawn naturally, and even 10 years later, still does not have a use in the game. We also saw the release of the name tag item, which was cool, however at this time could only be obtained in chests in dungeons, making it very rare and generally not worth searching for. There were also a few decorative blocks added, such as hardened and stained clay, as well as carpets crafted from wool. Yeah, I definitely don't think that 1.6 was as significant of an update. I think C tier is pretty good for this one. Horses, yeah, they're cool. Added some new variety to the overworld, but not terribly useful, especially when it came to long distance travel, so I think C tier is pretty acceptable. 1.7 was one of my personal favourite updates in the earlier days of Minecraft, and it was officially dubbed the update that changed the world. 1.7 aimed to completely change overworld terrain generation, adding in tons of new biomes. Some of the most notable were the Mesa, Roofed Forest, Mega Taiga, Birch Forest, Savannah and Extreme Hills Plus. 1.7 also brought fishing to the game, tons of new blocks to complement the new biomes, stained glass for all 16 colours, and the new Amplified World type. Interestingly, Amplified Worlds were actually an unintended feature, meant to test a fix to reduce lighting glitches in the game. However, Notch thought that the new, slightly absurd generation would be a really cool addition to the base game, and so it became an official feature at his request. Yeah, as I said, 1.7, personally one of my favourite updates. I think it added a lot more variation in terms of biomes and exploration in the overworlds, and I love doing that, so yeah, any time a new biome is introduced is immediately a good thing for me, so 1.7, A tier. 1.8 was an update which released a fairly large variety of new features. The most important addition was that of Ocean Monuments, a new dungeon structure found in oceans. Along with the monuments, the Guardian and Elder Guardian mobs were also added. Ocean Monuments were among the largest structures in the game, and they provided a new sense of challenge not seen before in Minecraft. Slime blocks were also added, which proves a very key component of flying machines, used to automatically farm sugarcane and even create moving vehicles. Among the other features implemented were the addition of banners, the new Alex skin, which was the first new default skin added to the game since Steve, as well as diorite, andesite and granite blocks, which generated in caves. Personally, I really think that besides the addition of the ocean monuments, and slime blocks, I forgot to say slime blocks, there wasn't really loads to look forward to here. The new skin and stuff was cool, but I think players were looking for a little bit more when it came to the cave generation. I mean, we obviously got the new andesite, diorite and granite, but by now caves were starting to feel a bit stale, so I think players were expecting a little bit more. So I think C tier is pretty reasonable for 1.8. 1.9, although controversial, is immediately an easy S tier. I know the combat system which was implemented was disliked by a lot of people, but a lot of people forget that 1.9 introduced some of the most influential features in the game. The Ender Dragon fight was totally revamped with a host of new attacks and mechanics, making it far more interesting and challenging to take on. We also saw the addition of End Cities and the Outer End Islands, which provided new post-game content for players to tackle after they had beaten the dragon. In the new End Cities, players could of course find the Elytra, which is arguably the most useful item in the entire game. Although it would not be until 1.11 that players would be able to fly infinitely with the help of firework rockets. 1.9 also added shields, the shulker mob, and end crystals, allowing players to respawn the Ender Dragon. Overall, I think personally that 1.9 was one of the best updates introduced in Minecraft history, and of course Elytra is the most useful item in the game without a doubt, probably. So yeah, S tier undeniably, I think, despite the combat changes. In stark contrast, however, update 1.10 was far more bare bones. This update's key features were structure blocks, the polar bear mob, magma blocks, and fossils, which were a new type of naturally generating structure found underground. 1.10 also added strays and husks, which are often regarded as some of the most annoying mobs in the game. However, as one redeemable feature of 1.10, the addition of show chunk borders in the debug screen would prove very useful for the construction of many different farms, such as slime farms. Sadly, although we were just riding on the high of 1.9, I think 1.10 deserves the first F tier of this list. Yeah, I don't think polar bears as a headline feature is very engaging or very exciting for an update, so yeah, not a fan of this one honestly. Conversely, once again, however, 1.11 was another huge overhaul to Minecraft, which aimed to flush out some of the mechanics introduced in 1.9. The update added shulker boxes, crafted from drops from the shulker enemy found in the End Cities. Shulker boxes would become one of the game's most important features, essentially allowing players to carry around a second inventory, making building large-scale projects far easier. 1.11 also added woodland mansions, a new dungeon found in Rift Forests. In these, players could find the new illager mobs, as well as totems of undying, another hugely influential item for Minecraft. The woodland mansion was probably the most impressive naturally generating structure in the game, and added even more content to the already great Rift Forest biome. Furthermore, 1.11 also added the functionality of allowing fireworks to boost Elytra, which allowed players to travel infinitely across their worlds. A few redstone features were also added, most notably observers, which were great for creating redstone clocks and for using in many different farms. Yeah, once again, 1.11 a really solid update, and I think another S tier honestly. I think it just improved upon what 1.9 brought to the table, especially with Elytra, and woodland mansions were honestly just really cool, so yeah, S tier definitely. 1.12, which was also named the World of Colour update, aimed to improve the variety of building blocks for players in the game. It added the new concrete block with 16 colour variants, as well as coloured beds. In addition, 1.12 also added glazed terracotta, which would go on to become one of the least used vanilla building blocks in the game. We also got the new parrot mob found in jungles, as well as the illusioner mob, which strangely did not have a spawn egg and did not spawn naturally within the game. Additionally, 1.12 was also the update which added the recipe book, as there were now a lot of crafting recipes in the game, and this made it a lot easier for players to manage them all. I think 1.12 was okay. I mean, I really don't think more than C tier, just because there wasn't really loads for non-builders to look forward to. I mean, the new concrete blocks were nice, but outside of that, there wasn't tons really to look forward to here. So yeah, 1.12, pretty average C tier. Not really a bad update, but not a good update in my opinion. 1.13 is largely considered to be the first modern update of Minecraft. Interestingly, it was originally intended to be split into two separate updates, with 1.13 being named Technically Updated, receiving a host of technical changes, and 1.14 being named Update Aquatic. 1.13 overhauled ocean biomes as we knew it, with the addition of kelp, as well as adding some new ocean biomes such as the coral reef. Tropical fish were also added, of which there are a staggering 2,700 completely unique variants. The new swimming mechanics made traversal in water significantly easier and more enjoyable. Additionally, we also saw the new drowned mob, along with the trident, which was actually the first new weapon introduced since bows. Update 1.13 was also one of the largest patches in Minecraft history, with 385 issues being fixed. Although 1.13 was a great update, it also introduced the dreaded Phantom mob, as a result of that year's Minecon mob vote. The Phantom would later become the most disliked mob in the game, with the option to prevent them from spawning being added to Java Edition as a game rule soon after. I think normally I would place 1.13 in maybe A tier, but you know what, given Phantoms, I'm pushing it down to B tier. Pretty tragic, but yeah, Phantoms overall just a horrible mob, and whenever I personally am creating a new world, I always disable them. So yeah, a little bit disappointing, but everything else in 1.13 was really solid. The Village and Pillage update, or 1.14, was the largest update in Minecraft since 1.11. In addition to its changes and additions, 1.14 also received a full-on texture pack update, which introduced new art for near enough every single texture in the game. However, 1.14's flagship feature was the overhauled villages, with redesigned layouts and buildings. In addition, 1.14 introduced villager workstations, which completely reimagined the trading mechanics, now making it far easier for players to obtain items such as enchanted books and emeralds. 1.14 had even more content to cover, however, with the addition of pillager outposts, a new structure commonly found close to villages. Pillager outposts allowed for players to activate the new raid mechanic, a sort of tower defense minigame in which players had to defend villages from waves of pillagers, evokers and ravagers. We also got some new mobs, such as foxes, as part of the admittedly bland taiga updates, and pandas in jungle biomes. Another interesting feature in light of the new textures added to the game, a new texture pack called Programmer Art, the classic look of Minecraft, was added for players who preferred Minecraft's pre-1.14 textures. I think it goes without saying that 1.14 was an amazing update, and honestly had no issues with this one at all. It was really substantial, and I personally loved the texture pack update, so yeah, immediate S tier for me. However, 1.15 was a bit of an awkward update. Mainly consisting of hundreds of fixes to the countless bugs that came along with updates 1.13 and 14, the developers also felt the need to add some sort of new content to bridge the gap between 1.14 and 16. Nicknamed the Buzzy Bees update, 1.15 added the new bee mob, as well as honey blocks, honeycomb and honey bottles. Players were also able to craft beehives and farm the new honey blocks for themselves. Ultimately though, 1.15 was a bit of a filler sort of update, and I think a lot of players were really quite disappointed with it, especially after how great 1.14 was. So I think, yeah, not quite as bad as 1.10, but I don't think it's as deserving of C tier as some of the other ones here, so I think D tier is the only sort of reasonable placement for this one. 1.16, or the Nether update as it is officially named, was another major update for Minecraft. Focusing mostly on the Nether rather than the overworld, the number of biomes in the Nether went from 1 to 5, with the Soul Sand Valley, Basalt Delta, Warped Forest and Crimson Forest being amongst the new biomes added. 1.16 also added the Bastion structure, as well as adding the new mob called the Piglin. Along with Piglins came the new bartering system, which was a form of trading similar to that of villagers. This feature became one of the most influential changes to Minecraft speedrunning, as runners were now able to obtain ender pearls significantly faster than before. Perhaps the largest feature in the Nether update, however, was the Netherite, a new tier of material which was stronger than diamonds. Netherite was the first new tier of tools, armour and weapons introduced to the game which was stronger than diamonds, and while incredibly rare and often dangerous to find, was certainly worth the upgrade. 1.16 also added the first new music disc since the original 11, Pigstep. It was also composed by Lena Rain, who was new to Minecraft's music team, adding some variety to C418's already terrific soundtrack. Yeah, 1.16 was another really good update, and I think A tier is pretty good. I don't think it totally revolutionised the game like some of the ones up here, but definitely more than worthy of A tier. 1.17 was officially dubbed Caves and Cliffs Part 1, which essentially introduced all the new blocks from Caves and Cliffs, but without the generation overhaul which would later be introduced in 1.18. This was largely due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, as well as several technical difficulties that Mojang faced while trying to optimise the new changes for all versions of the game. 1.17 also saw the addition of a large variety of new blocks, such as moss, dripstone, deep slate, and much more. The update was quite experimental and a little buggy, as the developers still weren't sure what they wanted to put in it and what they wanted to save for 1.18. 1.17 was quite disappointing for players, however, as many people were super excited for the big Caves and Cliffs updates, only to realise we were only receiving half of it. Personally though, I really enjoyed 1.17. A lot of my favourite blocks were added in here, especially Deep Slate, which I use a lot, so I think it honestly deserves a pretty solid B tier. Definitely not as high as some of these ones, but yeah, a B tier is pretty solid for this one, I would say. 1.18, or Caves and Cliffs Part 2, was the definitive version of the Caves and Cliffs update. Not only did the depth of the world extend to Y level -64, but the build height was also extended to Y level 320, a change not seen since update 1.2. In addition, the terrain generation meant for 1.17 was finally introduced. Tons of new biomes were added, such as the jagged peaks, and the overall generation of biomes and biome grouping was totally changed. Of course, the caves also saw a massive overhaul, now generating with sprawling caverns and enormous lava lakes. Additionally, the underground saw the addition of the lush caves and dripstone caves, which in my opinion are two of the best biomes in the entire game. Absolutely 1.18 deserves S tier. I mean, the terrain generation was just such a breath of fresh air for the game, overworld and on the underground. So yeah, and despite the fact that we didn't get to see the Deep Dark or the Warden, I still think this was a really good update. Second to last, we have update 1.19, also known as the Wild Update. Many fans consider this update to be part 3 of the Caves and Cliffs, as one of its flagship features was the long-awaited addition of the Deep Dark and the Warden enemy. The Warden was regarded as the most dangerous enemy in the game, found in the new ancient cities, enormous structures which generated in the Deep Dark. A new music disc was also added by the name of 5, and its eerily ambient soundtrack led many players to theorise that the addition of a new dimension may have been hinted. Back on the surface, we saw the addition of the Mangrove Swamp, one of the most unique biomes in the game, along with the new frog and tadpole mobs. Additionally, the Alley mob was added after being voted for in the Minecon mob vote that year. Furthermore, 1.19 also added some new blocks, such as skulk blocks, mud blocks, and mangrove wood, as well as chest boats, a feature wanted by the community for years. While I really enjoyed 1.19 personally, ultimately the Deep Dark and the Warden were initially meant for 1.17, so I think that, given that the only real sort of new feature was the mangrove swamps and tadpoles and frogs, so I think for that reason I would put it in A tier, but I'm going to push it down to B tier just because of that. But I think still a really good update, honestly. Last but not least is Minecraft 1.20, also named the Trails and Tales update. Although this update is yet to officially be released, its snapshot contains most if not all of the new features of the update. 1.20 is very broad and doesn't really have its own theme such as the Nether update or Caves and Cliffs update. However, it is far less localised than 1.19, with a variety of changes being added to all areas of the game rather than just a few specific biomes or areas. Some of the hallmark features for 1.20 are the Cherry Blossom Grove biome, the new camel and sniffer mobs, archaeology, and a host of new decorative blocks such as bamboo blocks and chiseled bookshelves. In addition, armour trimming has also recently been announced, which is a very exciting new feature, bringing a whole host of new customizability to armour. 1.20 also adds a lot of quality of life updates, such as changes to the creative inventory to make navigation a lot easier, as well as a new menu overhaul for the Java edition of the game. Sadly, this tier list in particular doesn't feature 1.20, but if it was here, I would probably put it in B tier. I think that definitely the camel mob and stuff is going to be pretty cool and add a bit more variety to the desert biome. And I do appreciate it that it's got more of a sort of broad range than some previous updates, with sort of little changes thrown in here and there to every aspect of the game. So yeah, I definitely think B tier is pretty solid for 1.20. And just like that, we have the completed tier list. Here's all the placements of the all major updates in Minecraft history, along with 1.20, which would be placed in B tier, which sadly is not here. But yeah, definitely let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. I think I'm already going to get some slag, probably for where I place 1.16 and yeah, maybe 1.19 as well, or 1.17. Yeah, definitely let me know what you think. This is just my personal opinion, however. But if you did end up enjoying today's video, please do like and subscribe. And as always, hope you all have a good day, and I'll see you all very, very soon.